The Mnemosyne ring had been turning for 11,000 years, and in all that time, not one of the 890,000 catalogued wrecks had asked a question. Archivist Venn touched the plaque anyway. It was a habit he did not admit to, a small superstition from his first century of work. His fingers, pale and scarred from 12,000 excavations, brushed the etched designation KOV 78441, a trade frigate, crew of 30, asphyxiated when their recycler failed, and he logged it. The ozone in the corridor mixed with preservative gas, and the hush of 1,000 species breathing apparatus filled the silver torus like a held breath. He had been doing this for 347 years. The ring was the size of a small moon, carved from the nickel iron core of a shattered world. Its corridors smelled of cold stone and ozone. 890,000 dead civilizations lay catalogued within its halls, each wreck tagged, logged, filed. Venn had touched the last plaque 3 days ago, the 890,000th. He did not expect the 890,000 first. The scout drone's anomaly reading arrived on the morning of the 19th day. Venn was drinking his third cup of nutrient broth when the signal cut through. Curacao, his assistant, was the one who saw it first. She was Kavani too, younger by 4 centuries, her bone conduction comm implant flickering blue at her temple as she parsed the data. Hull fragment, she said, 14 kilometers, buried in the Kethri Deeps. Venn set the cup down. The Kethri Deeps were a sterile sector, declared dead 9,000 years ago. A dead pulsar's accretion disk, nothing but dust and radiation that nothing survived. Carbon-dated, Curacao continued, and her voice did something Venn had never heard before. It thinned. 50,000 years. Venn touched his own implant, running the numbers himself. The math was simple. The Kethri Deeps had been sterile for 9,000 years. The hull was 50,000 years old. The gap was not an error. It was a design. They took a survey cutter. The trip was 11 hours through dead space, and Venn spent most of it watching Curacao. She had a photograph she kept in her breast pocket, her bondmate, dead 20 years, a human medic who had taught her to touch the photograph when she was frightened. She was touching it now, her gloved fingers brushing the edge of the frame every few minutes. The Kethri Deeps looked like a wound. The dead pulsar's accretion disk spiraled in shades of rust and black, and the whole fragment sat in it like a tooth in a gum. It was not wreckage. That was the first wrong thing. It was intact. Black, non-reflective, 14 kilometers from tip to tip, and it did not register on any spectrum Venn's instruments could read. Energy signature, Curacao said, her voice flat. Warm. Venn stared at the reading. Warm. After 50,000 years in a dead pulsar's disk, the hull was warm. The excavation took 6 days. They used drones at first, then manual cutters when the drone's sensors returned nothing but static. On the 6th day, Curaçao's glove brushed a raised panel on the black hull. The panel lit. The hull absorbed the light instead of reflecting it, and the glow vanished into the surface like water into sand. Then the voice came. It sounded like stone grinding against starlight. It spoke in a language Venn did not know, harsh and rhythmic, for exactly 4 seconds. Then it switched. Has the war ended? Curaçao's hand froze on the panel. Her other hand found the photograph in her pocket. Venn opened his mouth to answer, to say something administrative, something that would file this moment into a category he understood. There is no war, he said, not for 9,000 years. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something Venn could not name. Then the voice came again, and this time it was softer, or perhaps Venn was only hearing it differently. Define peace. 7 seconds of silence. Venn realized he had no definition the vessel would accept. I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Stay close. Prefect Yorindrel arrived 14 hours later. He came in a Corvathi administrative shuttle, compact and efficient, smelling of stale ration packs and ozone. Drell was 1.7 meters of clay-colored skin and bureaucratic certainty, his 3 vertical brow ridges flat with the agitation he tried to hide. His left hand was a prosthetic claw, the result of a docking accident 40 years ago, and it clicked when he was nervous. It clicked now, as he read Ven's preliminary report. "Quarantine," Drell said. "Silence. A 12-word transmission to the council." He spoke in clipped triplets when stressed, Ven noticed. "A Corvathi tell. This is not in the catalog. This is not in any category." Ven watched him file the order. 2,400 sterilization approvals, Drell's record said. None with appendices read. On the 7th day, Ven disobeyed. He sent a second transmission, not to the council, to the one person he knew would understand what a 50,000-year-old question meant. Commander Mara Selin was 56 years old, 34 years of Earth Defense Command service behind her, and she was drinking old coffee in a shuttle that smelled of recycled air when the message came through. She touched the gray streak at her left temple, a scar from a vacuum seal rupture at age 19, her tell when she did not yet believe what she was hearing, and read Ven's transmission 3 times. She carried a satchel that had been resewn 17 times. The copper wire on the clasp was newer than the leather by 8,000 years. Inside it, vacuum-sealed pages in a language the Galactic Council had never bothered to translate, generation after generation of human hands keeping a line unbroken. Selin had never known what the line was for. She only knew that stopping was not an option. She filed a flight plan for the Kethri Deeps. The hollow anchorage, her transfer point, logged her departure without comment. Humanity had been present but quiet for 300 years. The Council believed the galaxy was at peace. Selin touched her scar, packed the satchel, and did not file a return date. The trip took 9 days. She spent most of it reading the oldest pages, the ones that crumbled if handled without gloves. The first page was 11,000 years old, written in a hand she could barely decipher. It named a commander, Yates, Earth Expeditionary Force. Mission, hold position, await recall. The recall had never come. Selin touched the scar at her temple and wondered what Yates had looked like. Whether they had known, when they gave the order, that 50,000 years would pass. Whether they had understood that the war would not end so much as fade into administrative silence, into quarantine orders filed by clerks who had never read the appendices. On the 8th day, she found the sterilization order, 9,000 years old, filed by the Corvathi Administrative Authority, Sector Sterilization Division. The Kethri Deeps declared sterile, dead, empty. The vessel was 50,000 years old. The sterilization order was 9,000 years old. The gap was 41,000 years of engineered emptiness, and someone had designed it that way. Selin closed the page. Her hands were steady. They had been steady for 34 years. She arrived on the morning of the 12th day. Ven met her at the airlock, his pale ash skin looking grayer than she remembered from a diplomatic function 6 years ago. Kurasal stood behind him, the photograph in her pocket, her eyes on the black hull that filled the viewport. "The vessel has not spoken again," Ven said. "Not since the first question." Selin nodded. She did not ask about Drell. She could see him through the viewport of the administrative shuttle, his prosthetic claw clicking against a data slate, his brow ridges flat with the strain of a category that would not close. She carried the satchel into the excavation bay. The black hull absorbed the overhead lights, and the raised panel Kurasal had touched still glowed faintly, a ember in a bed of ash. Selin set the satchel on the examination table. She opened the clasp, copper wire, 8,000 years newer than the leather, and laid the first page flat. "The war ended," she said. Her voice was quiet, methodical, carrying weight without displaying it. "We did not." The panel brightened. The stone-grinding voice returned, and this time it carried something Ven had not heard before, something like relief, or like recognition. Ambassador Thrin arrived 4 hours later. She was Vali, 12,000 years old, frail in a gravity harness that hummed softly against her small frame. Her eyes were like faded starlight, and she had not left her homeworld in 4,000 years. She came because Ven's second transmission, the one Drell did not know about, had contained a name. Yates. Thren's gravity harness settled onto the deck with a soft hiss. She looked at the black hull, at the panel that still glowed, at Selen's satchel open on the table. "I know that name," Thren said. Her voice was thin, ancient, the voice of someone who had watched civilizations rise and forget themselves. "I have not spoken it in 9,000 years." Ven felt something shift in the room, not the air, something older. The hush of the Mnemosyne ring, the held breath of 890,000 dead civilizations, seemed to lean closer. Thren touched the photograph in Kurasal's pocket without asking permission. The human gesture, learned from a medic 20 years ago, passed between them like a current. "The children's stories," Thren said. "They said humans were never loud. They were present. They built in the forgotten places. They made things that waited." She looked at the vessel, the black hull, the warm energy signature after 50,000 years. "This is not unique," Thren said. "It is simply the first one allowed to wake." Drell filed another sterilization request. His claw clicked against the slate, faster now, the triplet rhythm of his stress breaking into quadruplets. The council's response was automatic, quarantine maintained, silence advised. But Drell was looking at Thren, at the 12,000-year-old Vali who had crossed dead space for a name, at Selen's satchel, open on the table, pages catching the light, at the vessel's hull, glowing soft amber now, the color of old coals. He had approved 2,400 sterilization orders, without reading the appendices. He had never seen a wreck ask a question. Selen touched the scar at her temple. The vessel's voice came again, softer now, the stone grinding reduced to a murmur. "The recall order," it said, 50,000 years old, never rescinded. Why did no one come?" Selen looked at the satchel. At the pages, generation after generation, gaps of centuries where nothing was needed, but the line never breaking. She thought of Yates, giving an order that would outlast species. She thought of the sterilization gap, 41,000 years of designed emptiness, a silence so complete it had become its own kind of weapon. "What does peace mean?" the vessel asked, when the war never officially ended, only faded into administrative silence. Selen did not answer, not with words. She turned the page. The next sheet was newer, only 3,000 years old, written in a hand she recognized from her own training. It recorded a transfer, a continuation, a promise kept by someone who had never known what the promise was for. She laid it on the table. The vessel's hull pulsed, amber deepening to gold. Ven watched from the doorway, his 347-year routine of cataloging death suddenly insufficient. He had touched 890,000 plaques. He had never touched a living archive. Kurasal's fingers found the photograph in her pocket. Thren's gravity harness hummed a lower note, settling. Drell's claw stopped clicking. The vessel spoke one last time before the silence returned. "Define peace," it said again. But this time, Selen thought, it did not sound like a question. It sounded like a test. Selen did not answer the vessel's test. She turned another page. The satchel held records from eras when humanity had been loud, then quiet, then barely a whisper in council chambers. Some pages were dense with names, crews, outposts, transfer logs. Others held only a single line, a hand steadier than the one before it, proof that someone had kept the lamp burning when there was no oil left. Thren's gravity harness hummed lower, a volley sign of deep attention. "The first page," she said, her faded starlight eyes on the 11,000-year-old sheet. "It names Yates, but Yates was not the first. Selin looked up. Explain. Children's stories, Thren said. Before the silence, before the council, humans built in the dark places, not weapons, witnesses, things that would wait longer than memory. She touched the black hull. Her frail hand left no mark, but the amber glow deepened where her fingers had been. The vessel is not a ship, Thren said. It is a question. And questions do not rust. Drell stood in the doorway of the administrative shuttle, his prosthetic claw motionless for the first time since his arrival. He had filed the sterilization request. The council's automated response had come back in the time it took him to blink, quarantine maintained, silence advised. But he was watching Thren, the 12,000-year-old ambassador who had crossed dead space for a name. The ancient Vali whose people's stories were dismissed as fairy tales by the same council that now told him to stay quiet. His claw twitched once, a single click. He had never questioned a category before. Ven logged the moment. Not on his official slate, that was still reporting anomalous debris, quarantine status pending. He logged it on a personal recorder he had not used in 2 centuries, a device he kept for moments that did not fit the catalog. The vessel's self-designation, he said aloud, for the recorder and for himself. The dormant, logged by Commander Yates, Earth Expeditionary Force. Mission, hold position, await recall. He paused. The words felt wrong in his mouth, like a language he had forgotten he knew. The recall never came. Kurasal stood beside him, the photograph in her pocket, her eyes on Selin's hands as they moved from page to page. What is she looking for? Not looking, Ven said, showing. Selin found the gap. It was not a missing page. It was a page that should not exist, dated to an era when the Council's records showed no human activity in this sector. The sheet recorded a transfer of responsibility, a signature, a new name taking up the thread. The hand was different, the ink was different, the promise was the same. She laid it on the table next to the first page. The vessel's hull pulsed, gold shifting toward something warmer, something closer to the color of old sunlight. The line is unbroken, Selin said, not to the vessel, to the room, to Ven and Kurasal and Thren and even to Drell still frozen in the doorway. Generation after generation, gaps of centuries where nothing was needed, but the line never stopped. Thren's harness whined, adjusting to a posture Ven had never seen a Vali take. Straight. Almost defiant. The sterilization order, Thren said, 9,000 years old, filed after the last human ship was seen in Council space. But the vessel is 50,000 years old. Someone knew it was here. Someone made sure no one would find it. Selin touched the scar at her temple. The gap is the weapon, not the vessel, the silence. Drell moved. It was a small movement, barely worth recording. He stepped from the doorway of his shuttle onto the deck of the excavation bay. His prosthetic claw clicked once, a single sound in the hush. The Council, he said, and his voice was not clipped triplets anymore. It was something slower, something that did not fit his administrative training. The Council believes the galaxy is at peace. Selin did not look up from the satchel. Define peace. Drell's brow ridges flattened completely, a Korvathi sign of distress so deep it bordered on physical pain. I don't know, he said. I have approved thousands of orders. I have never been asked to define the thing I was protecting. The vessel's voice returned, and this time it was not a question. It was a statement. Peace is the absence of witnesses. War is the absence of records. I have been waiting for 50,000 years to learn which one this galaxy chose. The room held its breath. Not metaphorically. Ven felt his own lungs stop, felt Kurasal's hand freeze on the photograph in her pocket, felt the thousand subtle sounds of life aboard the excavation bay reduce themselves to nothing. Then Selin spoke. The war ended, she said. Her voice was the same quiet, methodical weight it had been since her arrival, but something had shifted beneath it. Not louder, deeper. We did not. She turned the final page. It was not old. It was recent, written in her own hand, dated to the morning she had received Ven's transmission. A single line: "The recall is not rescinded. The promise is not broken. I am here." She laid it on the table. The vessel's hull blazed amber, gold, a color Ven had no name for. The stone-grinding voice returned, and this time it carried no question at all. "Commander Yates," it said, "is dead." "Yes," Selin said. "Her order is not." "No." The silence that followed was different from the others. It was not full of waiting. It was full of something being born. Ven made a decision he had not made in 347 years of cataloging death. He touched the vessel's hull. The surface was warm. Not the warmth of machinery, not the warmth of a reactor core. The warmth of a hand held too long in the cold. "Living archive designation," he said, his voice loud in the quiet. "Not wreck, not debris, not quarantine status pending." Curacao looked at him, the photograph half out of her pocket. "Ven, the Council." "The Council believes the galaxy is at peace," Ven said. "I am no longer certain what that means." Thren began to speak. She spoke for a long time, her ancient voice weaving through the excavation bay like smoke. She spoke of the era before human silence, when humans had been present but not loud, when they had built in the forgotten places and made things that waited. She spoke of Yates, not as a commander but as a promise, a name passed down through volley oral history, the only living memory of a time the Council had declared irrelevant. "Humans were never conquerors," Thren said. "They were archivists. They built the Mnemosyne Ring's predecessor. They catalogued the dead before the Kavani took up the work. And when the Council rose, when peace became administrative, humans withdrew. Not because they were defeated, because they had seen what administrative peace cost." She looked at Drell. The Korvathi prefect stood motionless, his claw silent, his clay-colored skin paler than Ven had ever seen it. "The sterilization of the Kethri deeps," Thren said. "It was not a discovery, it was a burial. Someone in the Council's past knew what slept here. Someone made sure the sleep would not be disturbed, not by accident, by design." Selin touched the scar at her temple. 41,000 years of designed silence. The question is not who built the gap. The question is who benefited from it. The vessel spoke again, and its voice was softer now, the stone grinding reduced to a murmur like distant thunder. "I have a final transmission," it said. "Recorded by Commander Yates 50,000 years ago. I have never played it. I was instructed to wait for recall. To wait for someone who remembered." The excavation bay went quiet. Even the hum of Thren's gravity harness seemed to fade. "Play it," Selin said. The vessel's hull dimmed, the amber light contracting to a single point on the raised panel Curacao had touched. Then a new voice filled the room, human, female, young. The voice of someone who had given an order she knew would outlast her species. "This is Commander Yates, Earth Expeditionary Force. If you are hearing this, the war has either ended or outlasted memory. The vessel is not a weapon, it is a witness. It will ask you what peace means. I do not know the answer. I only know that forgetting is not peace. Silence is not peace. Administration without witnesses is the slowest form of erasure." The voice paused. Ven heard something in the pause, a breath, a shift, the sound of someone looking at something they would never see again. "Tell them," Yates said. "Tell them we were here. Tell them the war ended. Tell them we did not." The transmission ended. The amber light held for 3 seconds. Then the vessel spoke one last time, and its voice was almost gentle. "Define peace," it said. But this time Ven realized it was not asking Selin. It was asking all of them. It was asking the galaxy. Drell's claw clicked. Once. A single sound that seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have. Then he turned and walked back into his administrative shuttle, the door sealed behind him. Through the viewport, Ven watched him sit at his console, motionless, staring at the sterilization request he had filed only hours ago. He did not cancel it. He did not send it. He simply sat and stared, and for the first time in 200 years of administrative service, Joran Drell made no decision at all. Selin closed the satchel. The copper wire clasp clicked shut, a small sound after the thunder of Yates' voice. She did not pick it up. She left it on the table, the pages fanned slightly, catching the light from the vessel's hull. "The Council will send a tribunal," she said. "They will demand the vessel be classified. They will demand the satchel be translated and filed and catalogued and forgotten." Ven nodded. He knew the procedures. He had written many of them. "And you?" he asked. Selin touched the gray streak at her temple. "I will be here when they arrive, with the satchel, with the answer." "What answer?" She looked at the vessel. The black hull, warm after 50,000 years. The amber glow, soft as old coals. The raised panel that had absorbed light instead of reflecting it, that had asked a question no living being had expected to hear. "The war ended," she said. "We did not. That is the answer, the only one that matters." But the vessel was not finished. Its hull dimmed further, the amber light contracting to a thin line along its edge. The stone-grinding voice returned, quieter than before, almost a whisper. "There are others," it said. Selin's hand froze on the satchel clasp. "Others." "Not here, not in the Kethri deeps. In the dark places, the forgotten places, the places the Council declared sterile, empty, dead. I was the first allowed to wake. I will not be the last." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of the weight of 890,000 catalogued wrecks, of the Mnemosyne ring turning in the dark, of a galaxy that had believed itself at peace for 9,000 years, while witnesses slept in the silence it had designed. Thren's gravity harness whined, shifting to a higher frequency. How many? The vessel did not answer, not with a number, not with a name. It simply glowed, soft and steady, and Ven understood that the question was not how many. The question was, who would bother to wake them? And who would bother to remember? Kurasal's hand left the photograph in her pocket for the first time in 12 days. She stepped forward, her bone conduction implant flickering steady blue, and touched the vessel's hull where Ven had touched it. The warmth registered on her pale ash skin, and she did not pull away. "My bondmate was human," she said. Her voice was quiet, measured, the Kavani way of speaking, but something underneath it had shifted. "She died in a recycler failure on a trade route the Council had declared safe. She used to say humans built things that outlasted their understanding. I thought she meant bridges, dams." She paused. Her fingers traced the edge of the raised panel, the one that had absorbed light instead of reflecting it. "I think she meant this." The vessel's amber glow pulsed once, a slow heartbeat. "She had a name," Kurasal said. "Elena Voss. She is in the Mnemosyne Ring's catalog. Rec designation KOV 78441, crew of 30, asphyxiated when their recycler failed." Ven felt something cold move through him. KOV 78441. The plaque he had touched 3 days before the anomaly reading, the 890,000th. "Your bondmate," he said. "She was on the wreck I logged, the day before the drone found the vessel." Kurasal nodded. She did not look at him. Her eyes were on the black hull, the amber light, the satchel Selin had left open on the table. "Elena used to touch things too," Kurasal said. "Plaques, memorials. She said it was important that someone still had skin in the game." A pause. The implant flickered. "I think she knew. I think she was trying to tell me that the catalog was not finished, that the dead were not all dead." The Council's tribunal arrived on the morning of the 14th day. 3 ships, Corvathi administrative design, dropping out of fold space with the precision of bureaucracy that had practiced its entrance for millennia. They did not announce themselves. They did not need to. Their transponder codes were sufficient. Galactic Heritage Council, Judicial Oversight, Sector Reclassification Authority. Drell watched them from his shuttle viewport. He had not moved from his console in nearly 2 days. The sterilization request still sat on his screen, unsent, uncancelled, a single cursor blinking over the word pending. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had sat and stared, and for the first time in 2 centuries of service, Yoren Drell had felt the shape of a category that would not close. His claw clicked once, then stopped. Selen met the tribunal in the excavation bay. She stood between the vessel and the satchel, her gray streak catching the light from the black hull, her hands steady at her sides. She did not touch her scar. She had stopped touching it the moment Kurasal had spoken Alina's name. The tribunal leader was Corvathi, like Drell, but younger, her uniform clean, her brow ridges smooth with the confidence of someone who had never filed a sterilization order she could not explain. She carried a slate that hummed with the weight of administrative precedent. "Commander Selen," she said, "the Council requires the vessel be classified, the satchel be translated, filed, catalogued, the site be declared sterile, as per Standing Order, Sector Sterilization Division, 9,000 years of uninterrupted precedent." Selen did not move. The vessel asked a question. It has not received an answer it accepts. The vessel is debris, anomalous debris, quarantine status pending. "It is warm," Selen said. "After 50,000 years it speaks, it remembers, it asks what peace means." She paused. Her voice did not rise, but the weight beneath it deepened the way a river deepens before a falls. "Define debris." The tribunal leader's brow ridges twitched, a micro-expression Drell would have recognized. The first crack in administrative certainty. "The Council," the leader began. "The Council believes the galaxy is at peace," Selen said. "I am no longer certain what that means. Neither is Prefect Drell. Ask him." All eyes turned to the administrative shuttle. The viewport was dark. Drell had not emerged. Thren spoke from her gravity harness, her faded starlight eyes fixed on the tribunal leader. "The Council was built on human silence," she said, "not human absence. Silence is a choice. Absence is a fact. You have treated the one as the other for 9,000 years, and you have called it peace." She shifted in her harness, the hum deepening to a frequency that resonated in the bones of every being present. "I am 12,000 years old. I remember the era before the Council. I remember humans building in the dark places, cataloging the dead before the Kavani took up the work. I remember Yates, not as a commander, as a promise." The tribunal leader's slate hummed louder, as if trying to drown the old Vali's voice in administrative static. "The sterilization of the Kethri Deeps," Thren continued, "was not a discovery, it was a burial. Someone in the Council's past knew what slept here. Someone made sure the sleep would not be disturbed, not by accident, by design. The gap is the weapon. The silence is the war, and you have been fighting it for 9,000 years without knowing you held the sword." Drell emerged. His uniform was wrinkled, stained with nutrient broth he had not bothered to clean. His prosthetic claw hung at his side, motionless. His clay-colored skin had paled to the shade of old ash, and his brow ridges were flat, flat, flat. The Corvathi sign of a stress so deep it had burned through to something beneath. He walked to the tribunal leader. He did not look at Selen. He did not look at the vessel. He looked at the slate in her hand, the one humming with precedent, with 9,000 years of uninterrupted administrative certainty. "I have approved thousands of orders," he said. His voice was not clipped triplets. It was not clipped at all. It was slow and raw, and something in it made the tribunal leader step back. "I have never read an appendix. I have never asked what I was sterilizing. I have never wondered why a sector was declared dead when it was only sleeping. He reached out. His prosthetic claw clicked once, a single sound in the hush. Then he took the slate. He did not smash it. He did not throw it. He simply held it, staring at the screen at the word pending that had blinked for 2 days over a decision he could not make. I do not know, he said, if peace is the absence of war, or the absence of witnesses, or the absence of memory. But I know that I have filed 2,400 requests to make something disappear, and I have never once asked what would happen if it woke up. He turned to the vessel. The black hull warm after 50,000 years, the amber glow soft as old coals. I am asking now, he said. The vessel's voice returned, and this time it was not stone grinding against starlight. It was closer to human, closer to Yates. The voice of someone who had given an order they knew would outlast them, speaking across a gap that was not an error but a design. Prefect Drell, it said, you have filed 2,400 sterilization orders. You have never rescinded one. No, Drell said. You have never questioned one. No. You are questioning this one. Drell's claw twitched, yes. The amber light pulsed, once, twice, a rhythm Vin recognized from his own heart, from Curaçao's implant, from the 1,000 subtle sounds of life that had filled the Mnemosyne ring for 11,000 years. Then the test is not for Commander Selen, the vessel said. It is for you. The tribunal leader's slate dropped from her hand. It hit the deck with a sound like a seal breaking. The council, she began, but her voice was thin now, the administrative certainty drained out of it. The council will send another tribunal, Selen said, and another, until the question is answered or the vessel is destroyed. Those are the only outcomes the council's categories allow. She looked at the satchel on the table, the copper wire clasp far newer than the leather. The pages fanned slightly, catching the light from the vessel's hull. But the vessel is not the only one, she said. It told us. There are others in the dark places, the forgotten places, the places the council declared sterile, empty, dead. And if this one wakes, they will wake, not because we called them, because we stopped silencing them. Thren's gravity harness whined, shifting to a higher frequency. How many? Selen did not answer. She looked at Drell, at the slate in his motionless claw, at the Korvathi prefect, who had spent 2 centuries making things disappear and was now, for the first time, wondering what he had buried. That, she said, is the question the council should have asked 9,000 years ago, before they declared peace, before they declared silence, before they declared the galaxy finished with its own memory. The vessel's hull blazed, not amber now but something sharper, something closer to the color of a warning light on a failing reactor. The stone-grinding voice returned, and this time it carried an edge. I have been patient, it said. I have been dormant. I have waited for a recall that never came, in a sector that was declared dead to ensure I would never be found. But patience is not the same as sleep, and waiting is not the same as forgetting. The excavation bay trembled, not from the vessel, from the ships above, the tribunal vessels, their engines cycling up as their captains realized something was happening beneath them that did not fit any administrative category. I will ask one final time, the vessel said, and the answer will determine what wakes next. Not here, not in the Kethri deeps, everywhere, all of them. The witnesses who have been waiting, the archives who have been silenced, the questions that have been buried under sterilization orders filed by clerks who never read the appendices. Selen stepped forward. She did not touch her scar. She did not look at the tribunal leader or at Drell or at the ships trembling in orbit above them. She looked at the black hull, the warm surface, the amber light that had burned for 50,000 years in a place that was supposed to be dead. Ask, she said. The vessel's voice filled the room, filled the excavation bay, filled the silver torus of the Mnemosyne ring and the dead pulsar's accretion disk, and the hollow spaces between stars where other witnesses slept in their own designed silences. Has the war ended? Selin reached for the satchel. Her fingers closed on the leather cracked at the edges, resewn many times, the copper wire on the clasp far newer than the material it held together. She opened it. She turned to the last page, the one she had written herself, the morning she had received Ven's transmission. The war ended, she said. We did not. Define peace. Selin looked at Drell. At the slate in his claw, the sterilization request still pending, the 2 centuries of administrative silence that had brought them all to this moment. Peace, she said, is not the absence of war. It is the presence of witnesses. It is someone keeping the lamp burning when there is no oil left. It is a satchel resewn many times, a line unbroken across generations who never knew what they were keeping. It is you, Prefect Drell, standing here with a question instead of an order. She laid the page on the table. The vessel's hull blazed gold, then white, then a color Ven had no name for, the color of old sunlight on a world that had forgotten what morning looked like. That, the vessel said, is the correct answer. But the light did not fade. It grew. The black hull, which had absorbed every photon that touched it for 50,000 years, began to emit. The amber glow spread along the raised panel, down the hull's edge, into the deck of the excavation bay itself. Ven felt it through his boots, a vibration that was not mechanical but something older, something that resonated in the hollow spaces of his own bones. The others, Kurasal whispered. She had found the photograph in her pocket again, but she was not touching it for comfort. She was holding it up, toward the light, as if Elena Voss could see what was happening in the sector where she had died. It's calling them. Thren's gravity harness screamed, a high whine of protest, but the old volley did not flinch. Her faded starlight eyes were wide, fixed on the vessel, on the light that was not light but signal, not signal but voice, not voice but memory made manifest. Not calling, Thren said. Her ancient voice was almost lost in the hum, but Ven heard it. They all heard it. Answering. They have been asking the same question in their own dark places for 50,000 years, and now, for the first time, someone has answered. The tribunal ships broke orbit. Not in retreat, in panic, their engines flaring white as their captains realized that the category they had come to enforce no longer existed. The dead sector was not dead. The sterilized zone was not sterile. The peace they had administered for 9,000 years was not peace at all, but the slowest form of erasure, and the erasure was ending. Drell stood motionless, the slate in his claw, the word pending still blinking. He did not file the order. He did not cancel it. He simply stood and watched, and for the first time in 2 centuries, Yoren Drell understood that some questions were not meant to be answered by administrative procedure. Some questions required a witness. Drell's claw opened. The slate fell. Not dramatically, it simply slipped from his prosthetic grip, hit the deck with a sound like a seal breaking, and lay there with its screen still glowing. The word pending blinked up at him, and for the first time in 2 centuries of administrative service, Yoren Drell understood that the word was not a status. It was a choice he had been refusing to make. He looked at Selin. At the satchel on the table, pages fanned, catching light that had not existed moments ago. At the vessel's hull, emitting now instead of absorbing, the black surface threaded with veins of amber and gold. He looked at the tribunal leader, her clean uniform, her smooth brow ridges, the administrative certainty draining from her face like color from a dying screen. I rescind, he said. The words were quiet. They did not echo, but the excavation bay seemed to hold them longer than sound should last. I rescind the sterilization order. I rescind the quarantine. I rescind the category that says this is debris. He paused. His claw twitched once, a single click, and then was still. I do not know what it is, but I know what it is not. The tribunal leader stared at him. Prefect Drell, the council. The council will send another tribunal, Drell said, and another, until the question is answered or the witness is destroyed. I have spent 2 centuries choosing destruction because it fit the form. Today I choose the question. He turned to the vessel. He did not touch it. He simply stood before it, a Corvathi bureaucrat in a stained uniform, his prosthetic claw hanging at his side, his clay-colored skin pale with the ash of burned categories. "Ask me," he said. The vessel's voice was softer now, the stone grinding reduced to a murmur, the voice of someone who had been shouting into silence for longer than memory and was surprised to finally be heard. "Prefect Drell," it said, "you filed thousands of orders to make things disappear. You never asked what you buried. You never wondered if the dead were only sleeping. You never questioned the peace you administered." "No," Drell said. "Why do you question it now?" Drell looked at the slate on the deck, at the word pending, blinking, a heartbeat that had never been allowed to complete. "Because she answered," he said. He did not point at Selin, he did not need to. "She brought a satchel, not a weapon, not a fleet. A satchel, resewn many times, a line unbroken across generations who never knew what they were keeping. And I realized," his voice broke, not dramatically, not for effect, but because the sentence was too large for the grammar he had been trained to use. "I realized that I have been the silence, not the peace, the silence." The vessel's hull pulsed. The amber veins brightened, and for a moment the black surface seemed almost translucent, as if something were moving behind it, something that had been still for longer than stone. "That," the vessel said, "is the correct answer." The light did not fade, it spread. Ven felt it first through his boots, then through his hands where they rested on the examination table, then through the scars on his fingers where 12,000 excavations had worn the skin thin. It was not heat. It was resonance. The vessel was not calling other witnesses. It was answering them. The signal traveled along channels the council had declared dead, through sectors sterilized before the Kavani had learned to catalog, into the dark places where other vessels slept in their own designed silences. Kurasal held Elena's photograph up to the light. The image was old, faded, the face of a human medic who had died in a recycler failure on a trade route the council had called safe. But in the amber glow from the vessel's hull, the photograph seemed to change. Not the image itself. The meaning of it. Elena Voss was no longer a wreck designation. She was a witness. She had touched plaques. She had kept skin in the game. She had known, somehow, that the catalog was not finished. She knew, Kurasal whispered, not to the room, to the photograph. She knew there were others. The tribunal ships did not return. They broke orbit and kept breaking, their captains filing reports that would be classified before they reached the council, their transponder codes switched to administrative silence. The galactic Concord had existed for millennia, 4,200 species contributing to its archives, and in all that time no one had answered a 50,000-year-old question with a satchel. Until now. Thren's gravity harness settled to its lowest frequency, a volley sound of completion. She looked at the vessel, at the light threading through its hull, at the way the amber veins matched the color of her own faded starlight eyes. "The children's stories," she said, "never ended with a battle. They ended with a light in a window, someone keeping watch, someone refusing to let the dark have the last word." She turned to Selin. "Your people built witnesses, not weapons. The council called them dormant because the council could not understand what it meant to wait without sleeping, to persist without demanding, to keep a promise you never made." Selin did not answer. She was looking at the satchel. She had carried it for decades. She had resewn the leather when it cracked, replaced the copper wire when it frayed, added pages when the old ones grew too full to read. She had never known why. Her commanders had never explained. The tradition had simply been passed down, hand to hand, generation to generation, a line unbroken across gaps where nothing was needed but the keeping itself. Now she understood. The satchel was not a record, it was an answer, not to the vessel's question but to the silence that had preceded it, the 41,000-year gap, the designed emptiness, the sterilization orders filed by clerks who never read the appendices. The satchel said, someone remembered, someone bothered, someone kept the lamp burning when there was no oil left. She left it on the table. Not abandoned, placed. The copper wire clasp caught the light from the vessel's hull, and the leather, cracked at the edges, seemed almost to glow. For the first time in its long history, the satchel was not cargo. It was not a burden to be carried. It was a message, left where it could be found. The vessel's hull brightened further, the amber deepening to gold, the gold to something like old sunlight. And on its surface, where Curaçao's glove had first brushed the raised panel, a new mark appeared. Not a designation, not a catalog number. A single word written in a language older than the council, older than the conquered, older than the peace that had been administered for 9,000 years without witnesses. Counted. Venn wrote the final report that night. He did not use his official slate. He used the personal recorder, the one he had kept for moments that did not fit the catalog. Living Archive Designation 1, he said into the dark. Not Rec 890,001, not debris, not quarantine status pending, a witness, a question, an answer that took 50,000 years to arrive. He paused. The recorder held the silence, the way the Mnemosyne ring held the hush of 1,000 species breathing apparatus. The war ended, he said. We did not. That is the record, that is the catalog, that is the only piece that matters. He stopped the recording. He did not file it. He set it on the table next to the satchel, where the vessel's light could reach it, where the next archivist, human or Cavani or something that had not yet learned to catalog, might find it and understand that some archives do not contain the dead. Some archives speak back. Curaçao added a new photograph to her collection, not of Alina, not of the vessel, of the moment the satchel opened, the pages catching light, the copper wire clasp gleaming like something newly made. She did not label it. She did not log it. She simply placed it in her pocket where the old one had been and let the two images rest together, the dead and the living, the witness and the answered. Drell filed one final document, not a sterilization request, a reclassification, the Kethri Deeps removed from the sterile sector list, the vessel designated living archive, the satchel listed as continuing record, origin unknown, custody transferred. He filed it underneath Venn's report, and for the first time in 2 centuries, he made a decision alone. Selin stood at the airlock, her shuttle prepped for departure, the hollow anchorage waiting to log her return. She did not carry the satchel. She touched the gray streak at her temple, not because she doubted what she had seen, but because the scar was part of the map now, part of the line that connected her to Yates, to Alina Voss, to every hand that had kept the promise without knowing why. The vessel's light had dimmed, but it had not gone out. The amber glow held steady, a coal in the dark, and through the viewport of the excavation bay Selin could see the first flicker of answering light from somewhere beyond the dead pulsar's disk. Another witness waking. Another question, finally heard. She did not wave goodbye. She did not speak. She simply stood for a moment, her hand on the scar, her eyes on the light, and then she turned and walked into her shuttle. The door sealed behind her. Venn found the satchel where she had left it, on the table, pages fanned, copper wire catching light that had not existed days ago. He did not touch it. He simply stood beside it, his scarred hands at his sides, and listened. The Mnemosyne ring turned. The 890,000 catalogued wrecks held their silence. But in the Kethri Deeps, in a sector that was no longer sterile, a light burned that had been waiting for longer than stone. And somewhere in the dark places, the forgotten places, the places the council had declared dead, other lights were beginning to answer. Venn touched the plaque on the vessel's hull. Not a superstition this time, a greeting. Then he walked back to his quarters, poured a cup of nutrient broth he did not drink, and sat in the quiet, listening to a galaxy that was no longer silent. The satchel remained on the table, the pages caught the light, the copper wire gleamed. And in the hollow spaces between stars, where witnesses had slept in their own designed silences for longer than memory, something was waking. Not angry, not vengeful, simply present. The war had ended, they had not.